Hey guys, I'm the MMA Breakdown, and we are doing predictions for UFC Fight Night 105, Lewis versus Browne. Follow me on Twitter, guys, and my link is in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. And before I get into my predictions, I wanted to ask you guys for your input on something. I would like to start betting on these fights. I think it would really add to the channel and my videos. I'm not looking to bet any significant amount of money, but just to kind of add legitimacy to my picks, add to the challenge, and hopefully make a little beer money from it. But I need to pick a site. I'm really not familiar with any of them. I hear different names thrown around online, Five Dimes. Capper Tech, but if you guys could recommend me a site, if you guys bet yourselves, just let me know your opinions, what site you think is the best and why it works for you. But I do think I've decided that I would like to do DraftKings as well as a traditional handicap betting site. I like the fantasy aspect of DraftKings. From what I understand, it's basically fantasy betting, and you have to choose, I think it's 6 fighters per event to win. So I want to do that, but in addition to that, I would also like to do handicap betting. So if you guys could recommend a site, I'd greatly appreciate that. And I would like to include that as part of these videos, showing you guys which bets I'm going to be making heading into each event, and then after the event, showing you whether I made money on them or not, and then tracking my progress fight to fight or event to event. So, please share your thoughts, recommend some sites to me. And hopefully I can get that started really soon. All right, on to the event, UFC Fight Night 105. It's not a good card. I really don't have much else to say about it than that. There are a couple of really bizarre mismatches here, at least on paper, in terms of experience, that I'll talk more about when I get to them. But, there are some good matchups here and there on the card, but mostly it looks like filler, and that's just kind of the norm for the UFC Fight Night cards these days, which is depressing, but it's a typical subpar card. First fight on Fight Pass at middleweight, Gerald Meerschaert versus Ryan James. I have to take Gerald Meerschaert here. Had a really nice submission win in his debut over Joe Gigliotti. Looks like a very effective pressure grappler. Went right after Gigliotti, was able to get the front headlock position, was working some knees from the clinch, and we got him down. I believe submitted him with a guillotine, and was just very dominant from start to finish. Ryan James had a decision win in his debut over Keith Barish, who is a low-level fighter, and James didn't look all that impressive, definitely won the fight, but just kind of looks like a big, slow, stiff striker. I really didn't see much technique from him on the feet. He did keep a pretty good pace throughout the fight, had some success on the ground against Barish, but did get taken down very briefly, but got taken down by Barish, I think, at the beginning of the third round. And if he's giving up takedowns to a fighter the level of Barish, I think that's going to go very badly for him against Meerschaert, who again just seems like a really effective, capable pressure grappler. So I think the size of James might make him a little tough to get out of there. He's 6'3", I believe Meerschaert is 6'1", and does look like a tough guy. Even if I'm being critical of his technical skill, but having kind of a sloppy brawl against Keith Barish is just nothing impressive at the UFC level. So I have to go with Meerschaert here. Looks like I said a couple times now, a very solid submission artist. And I was able to watch one of his fights before the UFC, and does have several submission wins on his record, and looks like in that fight I saw also showed that aggressive submission ability. So going with Gerald Meerschaert by decision. All right, on to the FS1 prelims at middleweight. Jack Marshman versus Thiago Santos. This is a fight that I'm stoked about. I'm a little worried that Marshman might get his lights put out here, and that would be bad for a guy with a lot of potential like Marshman so early in his UFC career. But I do think there's a chance that he could win this fight and surprise everyone, and I am taking Marshman in this fight. In his debut, he had a tough fight against Magnus Siedenblad. He got hit a lot in that fight. Siedenblad was able to use his length to his advantage and really was able to pepper Marshman with his jab and put some visible damage and wear on Marshman's face. But Marshman, he hung tough through it and was able to get that land the knockout combination. And when he lets his hands go, he's able to throw combinations. He throws with speed and obviously has power. Also kind of got dominated on the ground in that fight. I don't think that's really going to be an advantage here for Santos, who is primarily a stand-up fighter. So I think it is going to take place on the feet. And I would take Santos here if he hadn't dropped his previous two fights. I do think there's a real question about his durability now, his confidence. He was on a great streak there. Admittedly, never really beat anyone that meaningful. Steve Bussey and Andy Enns did have solid wins over guys like Elias Theodorou, where he showed good takedown defense, and solid win over a fading vet in Marquardt. But the guys he beat, I would say I would take Marshman over a lot of those guys. And Marshman, I think, is definitely a more skilled and brings a lot more to the table as far as striking goes than many of those guys that Santos ran through. And because of that durability, him being finished in his last couple of fights, and especially surprising and bad loss to Spicely in his last fight, I think Marshman, with his doggedness and his willingness to really get after it and throw with authority, I think that he's going to be able to find Santos's chin and put him out. Gegard Mousasi put volume on Santos, and he just kind of wilted under the pressure. Eric Spicely, a grappler who who had shown not to be a very durable fighter on tough. He was able to mix it up on the feet long enough to work his grappling game. So I think a guy with a unique boxing style like Marshman, he's going to be able to hang in there, and I'm going to take him by a second round knockout. Santos is still a really athletic, good Muay Thai striker, dangerous, has power, has speed. It would not surprise me if he halts Marshman's momentum here, is able to put him out, and proves to just be too much veteran savvy for Marshman. But I don't like how easily Santos went down in his last couple of fights. So taking Marshman by second round knockout. All right, next up at bantamweight, Ayman Zahabi versus Reginaldo Vieira. Zahabi, the, I believe, younger brother of Firas Zahabi. And I'm going to take Vieira here. Zahabi, I was only able to watch, I think, 2 fights of his. One against Scott Farhat, and that fight, both and the other one I saw as well. The guys just look like amateurs. They do not, him and his opponents, they don't look like guys with a high overall MMA skill level. The fights just looked really bad. Not much going on. Both guys seemed really uncomfortable on the feet in that Farhat fight. Just both guys weren't even moving much. They're kind of standing right in front of each other and kind of far away. Neither one able to really establish range, and Zahabi knocked him out with a punch that did not look very forceful at all. But I'm going to take Vieira just because, he's been through tough, and he got a win over Delano Lopez, who I think a lot of people respect as at least a decent fighter. I think a lot of people were picking him to beat Anthony Burchak going into that fight, and Vieira has a win over that guy. He seems to have a decently well-rounded game. At least he's aggressive everywhere. Maybe a bit of a wild, reckless striker, but does throw volume, throws hard, and he's aggressive with his submission attempts. He's pretty decent at attempting guillotines off of his opponent's takedown attempts. Although that his loss in his last fight to Markos Beltran was concerning. I thought he had a big experience and skill advantage going into that fight, and just could not get into a rhythm. Really struggled with the funkiness of Beltran's game, and ended up eating an up kick that hurt him, and Beltran was able to take his back and sub him off of that. So a very weird performance, and that's why I can't completely count Zahabi out. I think someone who's really committed to technique and is patient like Zahabi, and who's probably going to have studied Vieira well going into the fight, being a Zahabi, may stand a chance. But just looking at, may stand a chance of beating him, but just looking at, those few fights that I was able to watch of his, he just seems like an extremely raw, green fighter who has not, put his game together at all. So I can't take a guy like that against Vieira, who's been through tough and has a decent win already, and who seems really aggressive and has some skills everywhere. So I'm going to take Vieira, and maybe by submission. All right, at women's strawweight, Carla Esparza versus Randa Markos. I'm going to take Esparza here. Both fighters have similar skill sets, both wrestle boxers, and Esparza, I just think, does it better enough to beat Markos. She has that. She has those wins against name fighters on her resume. Has the win over Tisha Torres on Tough. Also has a win over Penne on Tough, who beat Markos. But then had that really dominant win over Rose Namajunas in the finale to win the show and win the belt. And Markos doesn't have any breakout win like that. She has a few wins where she looks decent. She does enough to get the job done. Her boxing is serviceable. Her wrestling is good enough to get by other fighters who don't have good wrestling, like Aisling Daly, which was actually a pretty tough fight for her. Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger. But that Courtney Casey fight, especially the way she lost, getting submitted by Casey, when she was the one to initiate the ground exchange, I thought was bad for a solid wrestler with a wrestling background to get submitted that easily. I thought it was really concerning. So I have to take Esparza. She has proven that her wrestling ability can take out pretty good fighters, like I already mentioned, Torres, Penne, Rose Namajunas. Markos hasn't been as dominant a wrestler in the UFC. So we'll take Esparza, although her last fight against Juliana Lima, she did seem uncomfortable at times in that fight, seemed to not really be willing to engage on the feet, and her wrestling wasn't all that dominant. I think she might be in a bit of a weird headspace after getting destroyed by Jacek, but I would say so is Markos, coming off of a pretty bad loss to Casey. So taking Esparza, I think she wrestles better, strikes at least as well, if not better than Markos. So Esparza by decision. All right, at welterweight, Nordine Taleb versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. This is an interesting matchup. Taleb, a really technical guy, does not throw nearly the amount of volume as Ponzinibbio. And Ponzinibbio, a very high volume striker, aggressive, has power, and not without technique. He can also be a fairly technical striker, even though he's high volume and he's aggressive. I'm going to take Ponzinibbio in this fight because of volume, but Taleb seems pretty durable, not an easy guy to hurt, to get out of there. And I thought he really just kind of broke through in his last fight against Eric Silva, catching the kick and just cracking him with a straight punch that put him out cold. And that was a shot. Eric Silva, who was a shell of his former self, but I still thought it was a really impressive win and spoke to Taleb's technique and timing. He's always been a technical striker, but never... I think that was his first finish in the UFC, so I thought it was really impressive. But I think Ponzinibbio's level of competition it's not comparable to Taleb's, or the other way around, rather. Taleb has gotten wins over Li Jingliang, who's the other Canadian fighter, Chris Clements he fought, I believe, and I think he fought another guy from Tough Nations in his debut that I can't remember. But whereas Ponzinibbio, coming off of a nice win over a really dangerous fighter in Zach Cummins, had a knockout win over Court McGee, has been in there with Ryan LaFleur, and did get knocked out by Lorenz Larkin, but that was a fairly back and forth fight for the time it lasted. So I like Ponzinibbio. I think he's already faced tougher competition, and just because of the volume and the volume, the speed, the power, I think he's going to be able to connect to more effect on Taleb, and Taleb's punches are going to be good, but they're going to be too infrequent to really make up for the difference in volume. So taking Ponzinibbio by decision. All right, a lightweight, onto the main card now. Alessandro Ricci versus Paul Felder. I'm taking Paul Felder here. Ricci, to me, just seems like a very basic fighter against Jeremy Kennedy. Just got held up against the fence. Had to fight off takedowns the entire fight. I saw one of his pre-UFC fights, and his striking just looks pretty basic. Doesn't look dynamic, doesn't look dangerous. And I think against a guy like Felder, who has unorthodox striking techniques, who does have finishing ability both on the feet and on the ground, like we saw against Darren Cruikshank, and who has already been in there with some tough fighters like Josh Bergman recently, going the distance with Francisco Trinaldo, Ross Pearson. I think there's going to be a huge experience mismatch here, which is a common theme on this card. And while I won't completely count out Ricci because Felder has shown his weaknesses in the clinch against fighters like Ross Pearson, has shown a lack of fundamental striking because he relies on those unorthodox techniques a lot. I can't completely count out Ricci, but I don't see reasonably a path to victory here for Ricci. So I'm going to go with Felder. Maybe by decision because he really hasn't gotten a finish in a while. But I could see him finishing Ricci too because, like I said, Ricci just looks like a guy with a very basic game, doesn't seem dangerous. Yeah, I'm going to take Felder maybe by decision. All right, at women's bantamweight, Sarah McMann versus Gina Mazany. Another just crazy, bizarre mismatch here in terms of experience and level of opposition. Gina Mazany, I think, has 4 or 5 pro fights coming out of Alaska, which is not known to be a hotbed for high-level MMA talent. Although Jared Cannonier may be an exception, but think of guys like Andy Enns. Gina Mazany, I don't know why she's getting this fight. She fought Juliana Pena in the preliminary fights on Tough. I would think I was only able to find one of her fights on YouTube, and her opponent just seemed to be a completely irrelevant fighter. Went out there and it looked like two inexperienced fighters just going in there trying to run headfirst into each other, and Mazany was able to get her down, get mounted, and just wailed on her, just kind of brute forced her way to victory. And I just don't see why a fighter like that, why the commission would allow her to fight someone like McMann, who's been in there with Rousey, and who's putting it all together lately. Had a super dominant win over Jessica Ai, and overcame a pretty tough and crafty challenge in Alexis Davis in her last fight on the ground, where she got put in a bad position in Davis's guard early on, had to fight through it, and then got the arm triangle, and we haven't seen submission offense from her so far in the UFC before that fight. So she's really putting it all together. She's showing finishing ability now. She's always been a great wrestler. So this to me just seems like murder. I have to take McMann. I'm going to take her by submission. I think it's going to be, this is going to be one of my most confident picks on the card. All right, at middleweight, Elias Theodorou versus Cesar Phya. I really like this matchup. Phya has some momentum, has a little win streak going, not against really top flight competition. I think Theodorou's the best fighter that he will have faced in his current run. I'm going to take Phya here for one reason only, and that's because while Phya has an extremely weak chin, you think about all the guys he's been knocked out against: CB Dollaway, Jorge Masvidal, Sam Alvey. There might be another one that I can't recall, but the guy goes down to power punchers, and not even guys who are more technical or more skilled than him on the feet, because he is a pretty skilled striker. He's a good distance striker. Has well-timed strikes. But it's been guys with power who can connect on him that, put him away. And Theodorou has not shown to be that at all. Theodorou is a good athlete. He pushes an extremely high pace, solid wrestler, keeps a lot of pressure on guys and can break them down with his wrestling and his smothering style. But I just don't see that being the style that beats Phya. I think Phya goes down to power punchers, and that's about it. So while Phya does have an extremely suspect chin, and that will always make him, not a very confident pick, I don't really see what Theodorou can do if he just tries to outmuscle Phya and take him down. Fahea's got a good enough guillotine. I think he stands a chance of subbing him. Or I think Phya could turn the tables and take him down, because that's really Fahea's game. Especially from outside. Phya has a great timed shot. We saw it against Anthony Smith, against Oluwale Bomboshe, and in his last fight against what's the guy's name? The Joker. He was able to follow up. He was able to follow up on his takedowns with a great submission. If Theodorou crowds him, I could see that taking away the wrestling ability of Phya. But again, I don't think Theodorou has the power to make Phya pay inside if he gets inside. And remember that Theodorou really struggled against Santos. Could not take him down. Lost the clinch battle and just got lit up when he tried to fight inside. So I have to take Phya here. And I think I'm going to take him by decision, although I do think there's a chance for him to get that submission. All right. At featherweight, Sam Sicilia versus Gavin Tucker. Gavin Tucker, I could not find tape on this guy. I think I could only find a highlight reel of him just destroying a guy with pretty savage ground and pound. I think it was a highlight reel of a couple of his finishes, and just seems to be a killer. The stuff he's doing to guys looks like stuff you would see in a street fight video. Pretty much all of his highlight clips are him on top of guys and just raining down vicious heavy ground and pound shots. So I haven't seen his game. I'm definitely going to be listening to some other people's analysis on this fight, but if I was just forced to make a pick based on the information I have, I would have to go with Sicilia, because while Gavin Tucker might be more powerful than him, might have more explosiveness and natural athletic ability, I have to go with the guy who's at least proven that he can punch a hole through guys' faces at the UFC level. Sicilia, though, is a guy who I have countless times called the worst fighter in the UFC. I think he's extremely untechnical, and he's been knocked out badly for it a couple of times in his UFC career. Against Tony Jason, recently against Doo Ho Choi. Although against Doo Ho Choi, he still was able to land some effective shots. And then his last fight against Gabriel Benitez, getting outstruck from range and then submitted. Sicilia's just a guy who wings wild bombs, unset up shots from the outside. He doesn't land most of them, and then gets countered pretty brutally. So yeah, I'm going to go with Sicilia if this is the only information I'm able to get. He's at least had a few decent wins in the UFC, knockout a knockout win over Akira Corisani, knockout win over Pepe Castro. Some decent UFC fighters, at least in Pepe. He's shown a little bit of wrestling ability. I could absolutely see him getting knocked out by Tucker. But Sicilia should have, I think, a big experience advantage. Although he is a hurtable fighter, a very beatable fighter. And, he was in there with Du Ho Choi and did land some shots, so I think that should count for at least a little bit. So I'm going to go with Sicilia, maybe by knockout, but I really don't know. I just haven't seen really anything from Tucker. All right, at middleweight, Johnny Hendricks versus Hector Lombard. This should be a really fun matchup. I think it's the perfect test for Hendricks, and good test for where Lombard is too, especially going up to middleweight. That was really the last saving grace for Hendricks at this point in his career to really justify fighting again after some really abysmal performances. I think everyone is going to take Lombard and completely count out Hendricks here. But Lombard at middleweight has never been good, at least if you think of his UFC run at middleweight. When he faced Yushin Okami and Tim Boetsch, even though he was clearly the better athlete, clearly the more dangerous and more fluid striker, he just seemed to get stuck on the outside, got stuck on the end of the jabs of the bigger men, got out-wrestled, at least by Okami. Just did not have the same explosiveness, did not throw the same volume, and could not close the distance with the same speed at middleweight as he could at welterweight. So I don't like Lombard at middleweight. I don't think he's an effective fighter there. And Hendricks, as bad as his weight cutting issues have been, and the toll they've taken on his health, and as terrible as he's looked against Stephen Thompson, and even against Gastelum, where I would say he looked terrible compared to the champion that he used to be, but still didn't look as bad as Tim Kennedy against Gastelum. And then, had a solid performance. Again, looked like a shell of himself, but was still able to get a win over Neil Magny, who destroyed Lombard. Hendricks, despite all of his problems, I'm not ready to say that, he's a guy who's easily knocked out, who's easily just outclassed and run over. You see even talented fighters like Gastelum and Magny, not having such an easy time with him. Hendricks has the more consistent boxing game. He's going to have a lot more tools to work with on the feet. Lombard really just has power and, as I already said, doesn't have the same explosiveness and doesn't blitz guys at middleweight like we've seen him do at welterweight. So I don't think he's going to knock Hendricks out. If he does land, I think he obviously could knock out Hendricks, but Hendricks will have a much more complete boxing game to work with. He can throw combinations. He can mix in leg kicks with his combinations. And then the wrestling, which is something we've seen Lombard struggle with against guys like Okami. I think Lombard will be the first to fade. Hendricks didn't really fade against Magny, even though he got caught in a triangle at the end of the first and third round in their fight. Hendricks is he's a real pest to deal with when he's able to get a hold of you and get you down. Real heavy grappler from top, and I think he can break Lombard physically, and I expect Hendricks to have the better cardio down the stretch. So I see Hendricks having the wrestling advantage, the striking advantage, and Lombard really only having the power advantage, but wasn't able to do that, wasn't able to put that to effect against lesser fighters like Okami and Boach at middleweight. So a guy like Hendricks, and this weight class change could renew him. This could be a lot closer to the Hendricks of old than we've seen recently. So that's another thing to consider. But I like Hendricks here. It's not a confident pick, just because both guys have really struggled greatly in their last couple of fights, and a lot of variables. But I am going to take Hendricks by decision. All right, at heavyweight, Derek Lewis versus Travis Browne. I don't like this matchup. I would prefer to see Lewis get an easier fighter that he can just kind of run over and get a really exciting, scintillating knockout over. But it is the right test because he looked awful. He looked like shit against Shamil Abdurakhimov in his last fight. And it was very surprising because against Nelson, the guy looked amazing. Was putting his strikes and kicks together like we had never seen before. He was able to push Nelson back and land a lot of hard, devastating strikes on him. And even showed some improved takedown defense in that fight. But against Abdurakhimov, this guy got put on his back, could not move. On the feet was not throwing combinations like we saw in the Nelson fight. Was not able to effectively come forward and close distance. Was winging shots from a mile away that had no chance of landing. It was a horrible display of striking and wrestling ability, and then by some miracle was able to wrestle down Abdurakhimov, get on top of him, and get that finish by ground and pound. So I say that because Browne, I think, should absolutely have the skill advantage in every aspect of this fight. On the feet, while Browne is certainly by no means a technical striker, I do think he is better technically than Lewis. Has more of a conventional boxing game to work with. And on the ground, I think Browne should have an advantage too. Lewis still, his takedown defense is improving. His ability to get back up from his back has improved. We saw that against Gonzaga. But Browne is a big guy, and he has a good mount. And we saw that against Mitrione. And some other fighters he's been in the past, Chad Griggs. If Browne can get on top of Lewis, I think it could be over. Lewis could get stuck and get pounded out underneath Browne. But I am taking Lewis, and it's only for the reason that Browne just has not won since that Josh Barnett fight. He won against Matt Mitrione, but I don't count that as a meaningful win because he was losing that fight before he poked Mitrione in the eye. Browne has just not had a meaningful win since, 2013 when he beat Josh Barnett. So going on 3 years without a meaningful win. And, he's fought good guys, Arlovsky and the former champ Verdum, but both of the Verdum fights, looked like he made no adjustments from the first fight to the second. Still got dropped in the second Verdum fight, and just got badly beaten by Arlovsky. So I'm not high on Browne. I don't think he fights with confidence anymore. I think he's taken a lot of damage. He's suffered several knockout losses, and I think that's changed him. I think he's a lesser fighter for it. and I can't trust him to fight effectively. And a guy like Lewis, who never loses confidence, even if his technique is severely lacking, always comes forward and always is looking for the finish. I think he will be able, that will carry him to the victory like it did against Abdurakhimov, especially against a guy in Browne who does have those confidence issues, has a weak chin, and it's just not looked good for a very long time. So I'm not counting on Browne, having a real return to form, a comeback performance here. So I have to take Derek Lewis, and I have to take him by knockout. And I think it's going to come early. I think it'll come. I don't think this is going to go past the third round. I could see Lewis getting taken down. Struggling with Browne's reach for a little bit early in the fight, but I think his determination will carry him to the win, and he will be able to find Browne's chin at some point. So I'm taking Derek Lewis by knockout. All right, guys, so those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 105, Lewis versus Browne. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. And again, please let me know about some betting sites, the ones that you guys like, that you use. I'm excited and looking forward to getting that started, bringing that to my channel. Hopefully it'll be fun for everyone. So, let me know. Thank you guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.